Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. I'm very excited to share today's guest with you, Ali Davin. She is an interior designer based in San Francisco. Her practice is called Jute Interior Design. She has got a beautiful book that I know that you're going to love called Live Natural, a relaxed approach to creating healthy homes. We talk about that and also her more intuitive approach to design and many other aspects of her life. And it's a really refreshing take on not only building a business, which she's had for more than 15 years, but how she approaches design, how she approaches her philosophy, both in her work and in her book. And I really think you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So please enjoy my conversation with Ali Davin. Hi, Ali. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today and share more about your story and all of the amazing things that you're doing. But I always like to start at the beginning and learn a little bit more about your story in relation to your journey and finding out the threads of how did this all piece together? So can you start us at the beginning and share a little bit about where you grew up? What type of home did you grow in? I think it's always interesting to know in terms of, what did your parents do? Did you go down a similar path or was it something very different? So, look forward to learning a little bit more about those early years, I guess, when you were kind of younger growing up.
Sure. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I think I was raised to really kind of like lean into like who I am authentically, like at a young age. Like I was never steered in a direction that wasn't really authentic to me. So I kind of, have basically been the same person since I was 5 years old. I never went on a detour and then switched. I've always just kind of honed in on like what my gifts are and what I like to do and what I'm passionate about and kind of follow that. So I grew up dancing, um, you know, 10 hours a day for probably like 20 years. So that was probably, my childhood. And I would say I probably have more childhood memories at the dance studio than at home because spent all my time there. That was definitely my extended family. And I would say I always loved design. I remember, every Christmas present, every birthday present growing up, I was like new curtains, new lamp, new bedding. Like that was just my thing. When I was really little, it was, my playhouse in the backyard. That's always been, a big part of my life as well. But I think I had originally always thought I was going to go down this like dance route. And then in college, I was kind of probably splitting time with dance and design. And in my mid 20s, I think I finally was like, design is maybe a more long game, career. Dance is much shorter. So I kind of like pivoted and started teaching more dance and then really honed in on exactly what I wanted to do in the design field. Up until my mid 20s, I had done a lot of gallery work, worked at the Getty Museum, worked at a museum in Italy, worked at Bonham's auction house, had done a lot of, antiques, art. And that was kind of I would say my education was way more in that fine art. And then I got into interior design in my mid 20s. I would say my favorite thing is definitely construction, spatial design, and everything about really developing the bones of a space. And so I feel like I learned most of that first, and then kind of layered in all the things from my previous experience with antiques and art and all of that. We do a lot of custom furniture, but I would definitely say like construction and all of the bones of a space are kind of what my strength is in design. Um, I grew up with one sister who still lives in Los Angeles. I live in San Francisco now. And she is very similar to me in some ways and very not similar in other ways. Um, and the other thing that's probably significant about my childhood is that my mom got cancer really young in her early 30s. And so she was sick most of my childhood, past when I was in high school. And so I feel like also having that um, as a child, it made me also very entrepreneurial, very good at taking care of things on my own, very self sufficient, as well as very self aware. And that combined with the dance made me really kind of like hone in even more deeply on like, what do I want to do? How do I feel about things? And now later on in life, I would definitely say I kind of um, value kind of just like my intuition and energetic gifts as much as I do design and the things that I've learned. Um, I think there was a lot about my formative years, just spiritually, that I think are really like playing into like my work these days.
Yeah, no, definitely can see that. Okay, so I there's so much I want to ask you about in relation to all of that because I think that one of the things that I'm always curious to know is that obviously, like you say, you were at this point where you had been doing dance for so long and you had to make that decision. And I think that decision is something that a lot of people struggle with because you've invested so much time, you've invested so much of yourself, so much of your identity is in dance. And then obviously at some point you have to make this decision of I'm going to let go of that. I'm going to let go of that identity and I'm going to go down a different path. So can we just pull that apart a little bit about what was your thought process in relation to that? And um, was it hard? Was it challenging? Or were you so clear on, no, this is the path that I want to go down now? And I can see that. And I feel confident that that is the right move for me. Like, I guess it's about tapping in a little bit to your intuition and a little bit of like what makes sense within your brain as well and the kind of the maths of it all. But can we just unpack that a little bit, sort of that
Totally.
making that decision? Because I think that's something a lot of people struggle with is like, so many people I know who listen to this podcast, they have been in other careers. A lot of people, they have children, and it's like, do I want to go back to that career? Or am I actually now going to pivot into doing the thing that actually I really want to do, or the thing that, is viable for me, or whatever that looks like? But I think that making that decision can be really challenging for people.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that I was equally passionate about the things that I was deciding between. So because of that, it was more of just, honing in on like what my gut was saying. I don't feel like I make decisions with my brain. Like I'm not a pro con person. I don't make lists. It's very much just sitting with it, sitting with how I feel about it and completely going off my intuition. I think I felt like the longevity of a dance career is very small. So I thought, I would probably own a dance studio or do choreography or something like that. And I could always return to that. So I felt like for a long term career that I could do for, the next 40 years, it made more sense to me to like kind of go in the design direction. And then if, I was like, oh, this isn't the best path, I could always return. And I felt like it wasn't necessarily going to be in the performing aspect, which is what I had done previously. It would be a new direction in dance. So it didn't seem daunting to me to just, you know, pick a path. But I will say, again, probably because of my childhood, I don't really have that much fear as a human. And I am not, I'm very, I'm a risk taker. So I don't, I just kind of jump in and figure it out. And that's just kind of how I live. And so, I didn't like, I don't mull over decisions. I just kind of go with it.
Okay. And so at what kind of age was that? Like, did you then sort of think, I have to go and study design and I'm going to go down that path? Or did you go and do, an apprenticeship of sorts? How did you, or was it just like hands on, practical, learning on the job, doing your own projects? What did that look like for you? Because again, I think this is where then people kind of go, okay, now I've made the decision. How do I make this happen? So to get started in design, again, I think
Mhm.
that's such a stumbling block for so many people. They want this thing, but how do I make this happen? So how did you, like, practically, like if we go back to those very, very early days of like, okay, I've made this decision, this is where I want to go, then what were the steps, those very early steps that you took?
Sure. So my undergrad degree was in art history. And so I had a lot of studio classes and done a lot of design work in undergrad, but not in, technical interior design. And then I was working in an art gallery in Santa Monica, and we were doing a lot of commissioned pieces. And we would be on installs, and the clients would ask us regularly, like, okay, so if we're doing this art, what is the table? What is the sofa? What is the upholstery? And I just realized at that point with that position that, oh, I just intuitively knew all the answers. And so I just started kind of helping, more of our art clients kind of do a broader scope of work. And I was in Los Angeles, and I just, you have a lot of industry clients in Los Angeles. And I was like, I don't necessarily know that this is who I want as, my clientele for the rest of my life. So for me, it was mostly moving to San Francisco. I kind of tried to figure out where I wanted to live, who was like more aligned, maybe clientele, design wise. And so I had some family in San Francisco, and I moved to San Francisco. And then I got a job working for a company that does like design build. So it was very turnkey, like architecture, interiors, everything, styling in house. So it was really an awesome opportunity to see everything, from the beginning to the end. And so I got a ton of experience there, and then started kind of doing my own thing from that, being there after maybe like 3 or 4 years. The construction stuff, I would definitely say was more on the job learning. And it was more just, showing up at job sites all the time and asking so many questions. And, there's some contractors that will really answer everything if you're asking intelligent questions. Other ones, don't want girls on their job site, and they're like, go away. But I was really fortunate to have like probably 5 years in there where, I just showed up all the time and was like, how do you do this? Why are you framing it like this? How do you know if there's a header there? How would I know if there's plumbing behind that wall? Like, how would I? And so now I feel like I have x-ray vision, and I can go into a house and know how everything is plumbed, where all the, I know what I can open up, and, knock on wood, but like 99% of the time we get structural plans back and like, I guessed it. And so that's just from those 5 years where I was just asking all those questions.
Okay, so with the job that you kind of got in, and that's where you learned a lot, what kind of role was that? Like, how did you get hired if you hadn't been to sort of like design school as such? You had an art history background. Like, did you just start in at like a kind of officey, kind of admin help, kind of assistant sort of job? Or did they, and were you designing, like using programs then? Like, what did that look like more specifically?
So, because of how I'm built as a human and like my dance background, I can't sit still. So, I can't sit down and do AutoCAD. I have taken AutoCAD, and then just from literally knowing who I am as a person, like I have to time block when I do anything. I cannot sit still. I usually take paper and like a scratch pad and like sketch stuff out for people to put into CAD while I'm on the treadmill. I do notes while I'm on hikes. I go on like hour, 2 hour hikes every day, and I just work like while I'm moving. I'm just so kinetic that I have to do that. And that's not the best recipe for CAD, right? So I learned in my 20s, like, oh, I can't sit. So this can't be my job. So I was hired to do design, but it was more like textiles and all of the shopping and sourcing antiques and the light fixtures and custom pieces and art and all of that stuff I was well equipped to do. It was just the technical stuff. But I just learned like I actually can't as a human do that. Like I can't I mean, but I also can't do Photoshop. Like I can't sit still. Like I can't write on a spreadsheet. These are just not things I can do.
I love that because again, when I speak to so many women, it's mainly women that I'm talking to, so many of them get caught up though in like, I need to learn, SketchUp. I need to learn, like, that's the only path. It's almost like, oh, if I don't go down this path and follow, A follows B, follows C, and so on. If I don't do it in that exact order, then like, oh, I can't do it, like, and they get stuck. Whereas I love you sharing that, no, you went from A to D and then you jump back to C or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's like your path is more winding and there are many, many different ways to get to where you want to go. And I think that, that thing of you really listening to and recognizing your strengths and your skills and really tapping into that, I think is really important. So then, okay, so you found your own way around this, but then when it came to setting up your own business, then did you hire people who were more skilled in those kind of sitting at a computer for 8 hours straight type of roles?
100%. And I would basically find people that complimented me. And I had someone until last year for like 13 years who, master's in architecture, CAD whiz. We are complete opposites. She would get hives if she had to go textile shopping, but she would put on a heart rate monitor, and her idea of flow was just to sit and draw and draw and draw. And her heart rate would be 40, 40. That was her happy place. And I was like, that's great because I would rather die than do that. And like my flow is like being like moving and doing something with my body. And then that's how ideas come to me. That's how I space plan. That's how I design everything is by moving.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah. But I think it's that self-awareness, definitely.
And so let's then go back to you decide, okay, I've learned all of these different skills on this particular job. It's now time for me to go and do my own business, have my own practice, design studio. How did you then get those first clients? Because again, I know that this is like a big stumbling block for so many people of, how you actually get those first couple of clients that will pay as well, like it's sort of like you might have friends and family and all of those sort of things. But how did you go about that?
So this is a little bit of a woo-woo answer, but I am a huge believer in like all things manifestation. And I spend a huge amount of my time just emptying my cup. Like when it starts to fill up, I just empty it and empty it and empty it and empty it. And instead of writing on a to-do list and like crossing things out and being more goal oriented and task oriented, instead I just empty my cup and empty it and empty it. And I feel like when my cup is empty, things just drop in. And that's just kind of how it's been my whole life. So if I have available space because I've created it, then I just feel like people call out of nowhere. And like that's how it's always worked.
Okay, so
I
can you
know
give
that's
us
weird.
no, 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 no. I love it. I love it. I love hearing different perspectives. And I think, because like I said, I feel like there's not necessarily one route to get to where you want to go. And this whole thing of
uh,
tapping into where you feel most energized and empowered, like that's where you've got to really stand in this. And obviously that really works for you. But give us some examples of what emptying your cup looks like. And
sure. If
particularly in
I'm just
those
like,
early days, sorry, particularly in those early days as
well,
well.
it's basically been the same my whole life. It's like if I feel like I'm lacking inspiration and I just clear my schedule, cancel everything, get on a plane and go somewhere, then I mean, I have never really had a vacation where I haven't had 3 people call me and ask me to do a job. That's just how it works. It's just like I prioritize, you know, like emptying my cup, replenishing me, taking care of me. And then I feel like the universe responds and kind of takes care of me because I'm taking care of myself.
Okay, I love
I
that.
don't, I know that's woo woo. That just works for me.
Hey, we're all open to different ideas. So, I mean, if it's working for you, it's working for you. So,
I
give us
feel like if I've ever gone in the other direction and I have been like, oh, I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to try to get clients like this, nothing comes of it. Nothing comes of it. It's only when I focus on like trying to take care of myself and just create space that stuff drops in.
And so can you share like who were some of those first clients then? How did they discover you? How did they find out about you? What did that look like?
We did a handful of design events. I would say the first 5 or 6 years, we maybe did 6 design events. So like showcase houses, we regularly did showcase houses, other nonprofit design events. I would say people found us through that kind of a way. Maybe a little bit of, networking, friends of friends, realtors, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, probably a lot was, design events, I would say.
Okay.
So
And
that
so
was effort. I'm not
yeah,
discounting
yeah.
that. That was effort.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I even remember the second time we did showcase, I had probably only been in business for myself for 2 years. And we were so busy, we couldn't even take any of the leads that were coming to us from the event. Um, but I also am really small. My office is really small. And so I max out really fast. It's not like I have a huge workflow at all times.
Okay. And so what kind of design events were they? Can you sort of explain those a little bit more?
Yeah, like showcase houses. I don't know if you guys have showcase houses, but we have like the San Francisco Decorator Showcase. There's showcase houses that are regularly like Kips Bay. There's just probably 4 or 5 that happen annually in the States. And so you apply to do a space and they vote on you, and if you are chosen, you basically have 4 months do to execute the design that you presented. And then it's usually sponsored by like El Decor, House Beautiful, or something like that. And they'll photograph it, and there will be a lot of PR and press. And then usually 50,000 people buy tickets and like come through.
Wow. Yeah. No, we don't have that kind
Yeah.
of thing here.
Yeah.
I can see how that could work though. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay. And so tell us a little bit now what your business looks like now in terms of the types of projects that you're taking on. How many projects are you working on at once? And was there a point as well? Maybe we'll start with this part first. Was there a point as your business was growing that you realized I actually need to work with more of this type of client than another type of client, and that you had to be more intentional with the type of clients that you're working with, whether it related to budget or whether it related to personality or how much creative freedom that you had with the projects? Did that happen at any point where you really sort of thought,
It
you know,
did, but it was definitely like out of the gate. Like I probably realized it year one. And I've had my own business for 15 years. So basically year one, I realized that I need large scale projects because I like to travel. And so I like to be able to just like leave at a moment's notice and it to not affect anything. And when you've got, a 3-year project, you can skip out for 2 weeks and it doesn't really do anything. So I realized I couldn't do any like really fast, quick turnaround projects that didn't fit what I wanted for my life. I also interview people back as much as, they interview me. And I feel like I try to hone in on how they make decisions early on to see if that's a fit. So I tend to work best with people who are quicker decision makers and make emotional decisions. So on a first phone call, I will always say, are you an emotional or financial decision maker? And if somebody makes decisions based on spreadsheets, I'm like, let me give you some referrals. I need someone that's making emotional decisions, that's getting super excited, that's how they make a decision, because that's how I am. And if they need everything on a spreadsheet and that's how they make decisions, like that's just not how I work. I am not aligned with that. And that's not going to be my person.
I love that. That is
So
such a great
we
question.
we basically want people that are, you know, emotionally connected to their homes, emotionally connected to the decisions they're making, and working on larger scale projects that usually move a little slower.
Okay, great. So then let's come to today, 15 years in. What kind of projects are you working on? Do they all tend to be in the San Francisco area? How many clients do you have a cap? Like you sort of think, I just want to keep my business at this size and I just want to work with this number of projects. What does it look like for you now?
Yeah, I don't enjoy managing people, and I never have. When I used to teach dance, I had to um, show people choreography versus speak it. I am just so kinetic. So I have realized that because I'm not the best um, verbal communicator, that delegating verbally and managing somebody is not my strength. And so I can only grow so big because I feel like having people that see and hear me the way I communicate is difficult. So because of that, we're usually juggling 6 to 8 projects in different phases at any one time. Um, and I don't usually go beyond that because, again, I like to travel. And so I just, my cup will start getting too full essentially if I get busier than that. And then that's just the opposite of what I want.
Fair enough. And so, what does your team? I mean, you've said you've got somebody who's 40 heart rates and loves being on the design. So, what does your team look like then to sort of make these projects happen?
Yeah, so I'm actually rebuilding my team right now. I took like a 6 month sabbatical and just came back in May. So I'm just kind of like ramping up. We had a big presentation today. But I'm like 6 weeks in basically to like back at work. Um, we usually have a CAD person full time, a designer, someone doing procurement, and then like someone that's like an admin. But usually, that's it. And I like to do the design myself. So I'm usually the one doing, the schematic design, sourcing, a lot of like most of the design decisions I do. I don't delegate a lot of that out.
Yeah. And I guess that's where you feel like that's where you're really contributing the most as well in terms of your expertise and skill level.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. And so let's talk about this sabbatical. How did you do that? Um, what was the decision behind that? I know you've got a book and we'll get into that. I don't know if it was like, I need to have a break after that. What was the decision behind having a sabbatical? Was the business still running or did you actually just kind of pause it for that period, close off some projects and didn't have anyone working? And yeah, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what that looked
Yeah,
like.
it was largely related to the book. It was like once the book was at a place where I could pause, I had definitely lined up a break so that I could kind of recalibrate. And I just was burnt out. And so I really wanted to just have stillness so that I could figure out like, do I want to ramp back up? Do I want to do something else? Like, I do only have one son who is in high school. So ultimately, when he goes to college, I would love to split time between here and Europe. And so I'm trying to figure out, that's only 3 years away. Like, does it make sense to ramp back up? Or do I want to do something else because it's only a few years? Um, so I really tried to just get still to see, do I still like my job? I had just definitely gotten burnt out. The book was like a whole thing. So I don't know. I feel like I traveled a lot and I just took time away. And then when I came back, it was like all these things just kind of came in. And so I just took that as a sign of like, okay, got it. I'm supposed to do this. And they're like amazing clients, great projects, like, check all the boxes. So I felt like that was the universe telling me that I need to keep doing this.
Okay. And and I will ask, do want to talk about your book as well, but just with then the clients. So, can you give us a little bit of an insight? Like, who are the types of clients that you're working with? Are they people who are, completely like in a different industry, not creative, and they just want to hand it over to somebody else? Or can you give us a little bit of an insight? Like, what are those kind of clients who are taking on those large scale projects and are happy to have you sort of guiding the whole process? Are they kind of similar age bracket? Are they younger, older? What does it look like?
Yeah, I would say most of the time they're like plus or minus 10 years. Sometimes we get people that are building houses in retirement that they just want to, grow old in. Um, I would say most clients have multiple homes. And so we're either doing more than one home for that client, or we've already worked with that client on another home, or the client is having us do a project and having another design team somewhere else do another home for them. Usually there is some experience, I would say, on the client's end as far as like going through the process. Um, and then because I feel like they do come with experience a lot of times, there's usually, uh, just more of they already know themselves. They have self-awareness about what they've done in other houses that works, that doesn't work. They can like answer questions better. It's just a smoother process, I feel like. We've definitely worked on projects where it's somebody's first house, but I would say that's rare.
Yeah. And are they from different industries? Like, are they from tech, for instance, or different kind of industries? And they're kind of really, they don't have that creative, I guess, confidence, and they're really wanting to hand it across.
Some are tech. Um, Not that many, which is strange. You would think there would be more, but I think that that's just me because I'm not super techy. So I don't know that I attract all the tech people. Um, I would say varied industries. It's just really hard to do anything in the States. There's just so many rules and it's just exhausting. And so if you can, have somebody help you, even if you do like design, like why wouldn't you? It's just who wants to spend their time on that for the most part, It's just a lot of babysitting and red tape, and the design part of it is such a small part of it. And so they are still involved in that, making the decisions, but like executing it, like if I could hand that off, I would hand that off too.
And do you think that's because you look after the construction side as well? It's not just the, like specifying tiles, for instance, and the kind of the textiles, like you say, but you're kind of more across the whole process.
Yeah, definitely because we're like way more across the whole process. It's very cohesive and we handle everything. I will say that something else that I probably put into practice maybe 10 years ago is we are not offering project management for subs, contractors, any sort of trades that we don't have a relationship with. It's just too hard to, on every project, learn a different trade that we don't have a relationship with. I just said no. So if they're people we typically use, great, we'll totally manage them. But otherwise, we usually ask for some sort of external project manager to be like the intermediary or someone else to kind of manage the subs because it's just too hard to form all those relationships over and over and over.
Let's talk about your approach to sort of using like non toxic materials, a more natural way of designing and building. How has that evolved over the years for you in terms of being a pillar, I guess, of your business? And do you think that's something that attracts clients to you, that they're interested in this approach that you have? Or do you have to educate people a little bit more when they come into your world that, hey, this is what we do and why we do it and why we think it would be good for you?
I think there's a lot of greenwashing around the word non-toxic, around the word sustainable, around really the whole industry. We did a presentation today and the client said, I know you're into sustainability, but that's not a driving factor here. That's not really high on my list. I just want to make sure everything is natural fibers. I want all antiques, and I just really want to respect, the history of the home and how it's historical. I'm like, "Mhm." Yeah, so that's the definition of sustainability, right? It's just like people don't think of it that way. They think of it as like solar panels and recycled rugs and you know, man made stuff with resin, which is the opposite of what we're doing. But people are just so brainwashed into thinking like that's what's good that they don't even know that what they like is what I'm referring to. And they just say, that's not what I'm into. I'm like, "Mm, yeah, it is actually." uh
So are people then, they're not necessarily coming to you for that? Or what would you say the mix is?
No, I would say most people say exactly what our client today said, which is, this is just not a priority. I mean, if you find something that, you feel like is good for the environment, great, but like that's not my top priority. But anything that you show to them that's not like full linen, they're like, or full, wool, they're like, oh, I don't like this. I'm like, "Yeah, it's just so funny." Or they want, only natural stone and only solid wood and all the things that we do that are completely non toxic because the materials just come from the earth and they're not treated. They just, I think with engineered flooring and the way contractors look at things, the way building codes are, especially in the States, and we have LEED certification here, which is this point system that is not pro environment. And it's just this brainwashing. People just don't, they've disconnected from, really nature, and they want to return to it, and they're instinctually drawn to it, but then they just don't even realize that, like, that's an option, I guess I would say. And so they just think of like sustainability as this thing that it's actually not. I don't know how else to say it.
No. Well, this I feel like segues nicely into your book, which is called Live Natural. And it's, it seems to embody, the sort of subtitle is like a relaxed approach to creating healthy homes. So obviously you're embodying these ideas within this book. It's a beautiful book. Can you talk us through why you wanted to do a book, in your own words, what the sort of the heart and soul of this book is about and what you hope that people get from it?
Yeah, so we definitely approached it really different than other cocktail table books. We wrote the book. I sat down and we wrote the book, got out everything that we thought was important. We wrote it, we rewrote it, we made it really digestible, accessible. We put it in list formats. It's really written like a magazine, basically. So you can go back to front, you can go front to back, you can go in the middle, you can just read part of it. You can skip around. It's just very approachable. And the idea is that anything you take from it is better than nothing. So if you just want to read one chapter and try to implement something from one chapter, great. And you don't have to read it sequentially. It's just really easy to read. And so we basically wrote it, then laid it out and kind of paired it with pictures that illustrate what we're talking about, which is kind of the antithesis of most cocktail table books, which is, photograph it and then you write about what's in the photos, right? So ours was literally the reverse. Um, so I definitely have design friends who don't read, right? And they just flip through things. And I'm like, can you please read it? It only takes 2 hours. Like, the point of it is to read it. I don't care if you look at the pictures, just please read it. But the people that have read it have been like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm like, yeah, it's only 2 hours. Just do it.
No,
But
I mean,
I would say, go ahead.
no, I completely understand. I mean, I've got 4 books and it's exactly the same. And, and I'm a writer, like that's my background is I'm a writer, as my first kind of passion and love. And, yeah, I mean, and I think my books, like my first book, This Is Home, is like 6 years old now. It's still like on the top 5 for Amazon for
Totally.
interior books. And it's because people read it and like pass it on to other people and buy it for friends because it's not just the pictures, it's the philosophy. So I'm all with you on this. But yeah, your book is really beautiful, and your
But
work
I
is
do
really
think that
beautiful.
that's
Yeah.
rare.
Oh, yes, completely. I mean, there are so many books that are kind of ghostwritten or, co-authored in inverted commas or whatever, and, but yeah, like you say, you do have lots of kind of practical tips in terms of, the different surfaces, ventilation, filtration, like different elements that I guess really help create more of a natural home and, yeah, some sort of practical tips. So I do think it kind of strikes this beautiful balance between inspirational images, because I mean, let's face it, that's what people want. You still have to have that, but yeah, it does have lots of other elements in terms of being quite resourceful and helpful in terms of that. How did you? Were these all of your own projects that are featured within the book?
They are. They're all of our own projects. Some of them are new to the book. Some of them are older projects that just we reference because of what we're talking about. I would say that, it's just kind of my design ethos basically consolidated into one spine. And a lot of times we don't even really talk to clients about what we're doing, right? We don't tell them like, this is bad energy, so we're not going to do this. You can't have your bed there. We don't tell them like, that's feng shui. We don't say, we don't give them all of like our reasoning behind how and why we do things and what we're using and all of that. It's more just the end result feels warm, it's healthy, it's breathable, it's good for the planet. But most of the time, no, I would say people don't ask for that. It's just by nature of working with me because I don't want to be around any of that. And that's not what I believe in. We just don't offer it another way. So I wouldn't give somebody an option of some sort of synthetic rug. That wouldn't be part of a presentation.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I'll be exactly the same. So, can you walk us through a little bit about your design process, how you approach it? What's often the starting point for you when it comes to designing a home? And yeah, a little bit then about what your, I know that I'm sure no 2 days look exactly the same, but what your days look like, what your weeks look like. Um, Kind of shine a light a little bit on that.
Yeah. So we typically start a project with like a big picture presentation where we do everything thought through independently and kind of present that. So it would be all of the elevations, schematic design, how the space is going to flow, what it's going to feel like, all the floor plans, how it's going to function, and then kind of all the tactile things layered in. And we kind of create, a Bible for the project and then work from that. We don't really piecemeal things out. We just kind of start with like a big picture master plan. Um, and then, we're usually only doing a few of those a year. And then it takes several years to implement, what we designed. Uh, I feel like since I have come back to work in May, I'm structuring my time a little bit different. I've always done time blocking and I've always been really efficient with my time, but this also sounds really woo woo, but I feel like how I got to a place where I was burnt out and how that's happened historically is I look at a calendar and I figure out how long something's going to take me. And I like, schedule all of my time. And then I'm like, oh, well, I can get these two things done at the same time. And I can do these two things at the same time. And right, I just kind of calendar everything out. And then when you have a bad day or something happens or, you have to process anything emotionally, physically, anything, there isn't time baked into your schedule when it's all calendared out for that processing. And so I have tried to just set my limit now at 30 hours a week. And I allow myself for like processing time. So if I get like emotionally overwhelmed or something was really draining or whatever, I just like clear my schedule because I have a cushion in there and just basically like have a feeling day and just like decide, how do I feel about this? What's the next step? Empty my cup. And I'm just way more intentional about not letting things fill up. I think we are really told to do and produce and get all of this stuff down, but it makes it so that like as life comes at you, you're basically like taking your emotions and like compartmentalizing them. And if you aren't proactively going back in and then like feeling them and getting, a release, you just have them all pile up. So I'm trying to like not let anything pile up, and I have this cushion now in my week to be able to like process everything.
And do you
That's what I'm doing now.
is that 1 day a week, or is it just a couple of hours every day, or what does that look like?
It looks different based on what's going on. So, like last week, I got really overwhelmed and I was like, I'm just clearing my schedule the next day. And I just didn't work the next day. And it feels weird because you have all this stuff that you have to do and it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets pushed out. And so you have a little bit of like, how can I do this? Right. But it actually has been working really, really well. Um, I would equate it to like when you're a kid and you're just like, I have a stomach ache, I can't go to school. There is something about that that is your intuition saying, I just need a rest day. I just need to like process whatever's going on. I don't have, the words around why I feel this way, but we're just going to call it a stomach ache and we're just going to ask for the time off. And like whenever my kid did that, I would always be like, sure, whatever, it's fine. It's just school. It doesn't matter. And like I would always be fine with it. But I think that's kind of like your body and your intuition just being like, just chill out. It's fine. You can miss a day. Just spend time alone, reconnect with whatever's going on, feel it out. Like, but as an adult, you don't do that. You just push through and push through and push through. And I don't think that's the answer. So I'm doing it different now.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it. And I wanted to ask you because you mentioned before we started recording that you live, I think you said on the edge of a national park, or you're sort of in a slightly more remote area. So, do you have a design office sort of in the city, or that you go to meet clients, or do you just tend to meet clients, at their homes? You've got a team. Are they all working remotely? What does it look like in terms of the practical considerations? I'm not sure how far out of the city you are, but how does that look in terms of, do you work from home and everyone else is working remotely as well? What does it look like?
So historically, I have always had my house, my office, and my kids' school within like a 3 block radius. And I feel like that's how I've made my life work. But now that he's in high school and he'll be driving soon, things are just changing. And also COVID hit, right? And so now people are like way more open to working remote. They want to work remote. So I'm doing things, just trying out different things right now. So I work at home way more than I used to, just because I think it's just like a post COVID habit, I would call it, but I didn't used to do that. Other people work at home too. I would consider the studio a pretty storage space. Like, I don't feel like we work at it. It just kind of is a pretty storage space. Um, I feel like yeah, I feel like most people like to work from home these days. Clients, either we go to them or they don't even want to meet with us at all. One of the two. But before COVID, I do feel like we used our office. We were there every day. We had client meetings there. We interviewed clients there. Yeah, I feel like things have shifted post COVID.
It's interesting. And so, how far away is your studio from where you live? And how far away are you from the city?
No, I am in the city. I'm just
Okay.
in like a really green part of the city where there's a national park, and it's just like I said, there's not really Wi-Fi. It's just like specific to where I am.
Right. Okay. I
Um,
get it.
and then yeah, no, the studio is still walking distance. So I'm a big like part of the reason why I feel like I moved from Los Angeles is in my formative years, I spent my entire life in my car. Like, I mean, you would get to 30,000 miles on your, odometer, like in a year, like no problem. And that's just like, again, when I would check in with myself, I was like, this isn't how I want to live. So now I'm always structuring everything so like I can walk, or, I have a British car that breaks down all the time, and it was in the shop for like a good 6 weeks this spring. And I was like, whatever, I don't need the car. No big deal. And I just walked everywhere and it was like wonderful.
No, it's good. Great. I love it. And can you just share just a few little practical things in terms of what does your design studio use in terms of like client management, like, the kind of the back end? I know you've talked about CAD, but how do you kind of those? I think people always love to hear like, what are your communication tools? Do you use Slack? What's your client interface? What does all of that look like?
Yeah, so we basically interface with clients in person. I'm not a huge emailer. So I kind of took I realized how much I disliked email probably 15 years ago, and really have been off email since then. I obviously do email, but my kind of rule is if there's not an attachment, then it can be done in another way. I just don't like to sit down and like monitor my tone and I'm just like, I'm not doing this. So, but I can't sit still either. Right. So I just don't really email. Usually correspondence is in person. I also will pick up the phone. So I'm the type of person when someone texts me, I just pick up the phone and respond on the phone because I'm just like, I'm not doing this. But that's me. And then we use CAD in the office. Um, we use Google Docs for everything. We use Studio Designer for, time billing, proposals, invoices, that type of thing. No Slack. I mean, to be totally honest, I didn't even know what Slack was until 2 weeks ago. Like, I had no idea. Like, some tech person told me. And then they make fun of me because they're like, you live in San Francisco. I'm like, I know nothing about tech. And we do have some tech clients who are like big deals in tech. I've never talked to them about work ever. Like, I would have no idea what they do. Like, I have no idea. So no Slack. Yeah.
Well, it
So
works for
pretty
you.
basic.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it works for you. That's all good. All right, I've got the final 10 quick questions that I like to ask everyone on the podcast. So, first of all, the first question sometimes stumps people, but I feel like you're going to be good on this one. Which 5 words best describe you?
As a person or design?
Yeah, as a person.
As a person, I would say passionate, silly, quirky, generous, and thoughtful.
Yeah. What's the best lesson that you've learned in life, business, both?
I think it's just to really hone in on like, your authenticity and really just live from that place and try to like tune everything else out.
What's your proudest achievement?
My son, for sure.
What's been your best decision?
Um, I think it's just, how comfortable I am taking risks and just really trusting myself and knowing that like everything is going to be fine. Um, I feel like just continually taking risks is like how you grow.
Who inspires you?
Um, I would say like my inner circle of girlfriends. I would say everyone is a creative in some sense and also just really entrepreneurial and just I get a lot of inspiration from like my inner circle of girlfriends.
What are you passionate about?
I would say health and wellness. Like that's what I spend all of my time, effort, energy, finances, everything is like on any sort of health and wellness. I love all health and wellness.
What dream do you still want to fulfill?
I want to split time between the States and Europe. So I'm interviewing countries currently to decide where that is.
I love it. You're going to ask them, are they emotional or financial?
Exactly.
um, what are you reading? What's on your nightstand or on a coffee table? What are you reading at the moment?
This is really woo woo too. But the book I just started is it's called The Witch Wound. And I think it's just again just trying to like hone in on intuition, the idea that like, we all have kind of that inner knowing if you kind of tap into it.
Yeah. I knew you would have a good book recommendation. what's I'm going to ask you, like, what are some of your favorite books around like that kind of whole thing of health, wellness, mindset, whatever you want to call it? What are some of your favorites? Like
So I will tell you, my list is so long right now of things I want to read. I hike for 1 to 2 hours every day and I listen to podcasts while I hike. So I probably listen to 4 or 5 1 to 2 hour podcasts a week, like a lot. And half of them are authors, right? And people like on a book tour. And so my list is so long. But I would say I also just reread Us from Terry Real, who's like relationship. I love him. Um, all the like old classics like Body Keeps the Score, anything that has to do with like healing, trauma, all that kind of stuff. Like I tend to just read all of them.
No, great. I love it. I knew you would have a good list. Well, my next question is, what are you listening to? So what are those podcasts that you really love listening to?
So I love Jay Shetty. I love him. So I'm pretty religious about that. And his have gotten very long. They're now like 2 hours each. Um, I also listen to the Expanded podcast, which is like the To Be Magnetic one. I love theirs. Listen to that every week. Um, I listen to a few other different wellness ones that kind of like rotate in and out. Most of them are wellness, and then some of them are just like fun. But most of them are wellness. Yeah.
Okay, great. And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Um, I think just to maybe cultivate patience a little bit earlier on in life. Like I am not a patient person, and it's taken me so long to even begin to cultivate patience. And it's just kind of like there's no, like, what are we in a hurry for, kind of a thing, right? And I don't know where it comes from, that I've always been so impatient, but definitely to try to do that way earlier in life.
Great. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed listening and learning about your story and your take on things. I think it's such a like permission slip to people who sometimes are a little bit like me, who can be a little bit like, things are going to be done a certain way. And I know many other people listening are like that as well. But I'm always open to other ways of doing things. And I do know that there are many ways to get to where you want to go to, and there are many, many different paths. And I love the kind of the confidence that you exude. And I think that we can all borrow a little bit of that today. So thank you so much for sharing that on the podcast. And I really encourage people to, and I'll share a link to the book and your Instagram and website and all of those things in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining me today on
Thank
Imprint.
you.
All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.